Quick question. When was the last time you went to hell? I don't mean poetically. I mean actually. Because according to Buddhism, you probably went there sometime this week and came back without noticing. You see, Buddhism doesn't say you go to hell after you die. It says you go there after a bad thought and you come back out before lunch. Most people misunderstand the idea of afterlives. They picture existence as a kind of cosmic scoreboard. Behave well and you're promoted upward. Behave badly and you drop down, perhaps returning as an animal. They take the wheel of life to be a map of what happens later, as if existence were a long courtroom drama. But suppose that isn't what it's pointing to at all. Suppose these realms aren't destination, but moods of consciousness you drift through every day. Think about it. Some mornings you wake up feeling luminous. Other days everyone irritates you and rage comes easily. Sometimes you move through life half asleep, mechanical, just reacting. And then there are moments when your own thoughts feel like a form of punishment. These are the states. The Buddha was not talking about places somewhere else. He was talking about states we slip into without noticing. Patterns of experience, ways consciousness plays with itself. Seen this way, the wheel of life stops being a story about death and becomes a mirror for living. The world around you and the world within you reveals itself as nothing other than these 6 realms, appearing, disappearing moment by moment. To begin with, Buddhism looks at life from 2 very different angles. There is the view from confusion, the world as it appears when we are caught in it. This is called samsara. And then there is the view from clarity, the same world, seen without distortion. That is what is meant by nirvana. Now, the teaching of the 6 realms belongs entirely to the first view. It is a description of samsara, the world of illusion, struggle, desire, and fear. Before the Buddha, people in India took these quite literally. They imagined them as real destinations, where one might end up after death. But this is precisely where the Buddha's insight changed the whole picture, and what seemed like a map of the universe turns out to be a description of the mind. When these realms are taken symbolically, rather than literally, their meaning becomes remarkably close to everyday life. Consider first the heavenly realm, the world of the devas. This is not eternal bliss, nor is it the final answer to existence. Taken metaphorically, the heavenly realm represents temporary euphoria. It is the condition of pleasure, comfort, and ease, the sense that everything is going rather well. One feels fortunate, even charmed by life. And yet, by its very nature, this state cannot last. It depends upon circumstances, and circumstances inevitably change. When the conditions shift, the heavenly feeling fades, and one finds oneself once again concerned with ordinary responsibilities. Heaven, in this sense, is always temporary. Next comes the realm of hell, Naraka. This is not a place of punishment administered by an external authority. It is the state of mind in which suffering feels inescapable. Pain becomes absolute. Loss, grief, fear, and despair dominate awareness so completely that no other possibility seems available. Time slows, the future narrows, and one feels trapped within the experience itself. It is a condition known, in some measure, to every human being. No one passes through life without tasting it. Then there is the animal realm, Tiryagyoni. This is life lived almost entirely by habit and impulse. One acts because One feels compelled to act. Hunger brings eating. Fatigue brings sleep. Danger brings aggression or flight. There is little reflection, little questioning. Life proceeds by repetition. In ordinary speech, when a person behaves without consideration or restraint, we say he is acting like an animal. This is not condemnation, but description. It is existence governed by instinct alone. The realm of the asuras, the fighting spirits, is more complex. Here consciousness is sharp, intelligent, and energetic, but restless and dissatisfied. This is the world of rivalry, resentment, and constant comparison. One measures oneself endlessly against others, seeking superiority and fearing defeat. Conflict becomes the natural language of this realm. Even when there is no enemy present, one invents one. On a larger scale, this same mentality expresses itself in collective struggle and warfare. It is a world driven not by necessity, but by wounded pride. Closely related, yet distinct, is the realm of the hungry ghosts, Preta. These beings are depicted as having enormous bellies and tiny mouths, forever desiring yet never able to be filled. This is the condition of craving without fulfillment. Satisfaction is always anticipated, but never attained. One object of desire gives way immediately to another. The hunger remains regardless of how much is consumed. This is not limited to obvious excesses. It can appear wherever there is an inability to rest in what is present. The ghost is always leaning forward, never arriving. Lastly, there is the human realm, Manusha, because it challenges us to ask the question, what does it really mean to be a human being? To be human is not simply to possess a certain form, but to live in a peculiar tension. Human beings are aware of pleasure and pain, desire and fear, yet they are not wholly governed by instinct. They can reflect upon themselves, question their actions, and wonder about meaning. This realm stands midway between unconscious habit and awakening. It is the point at which understanding becomes possible, but never guaranteed. One may use this awareness to awaken, or to become more deeply confused. Now, the significance of these realms lies not in their description, but in their immediacy. They are not stages of existence to be encountered after death. They are modes of experience through which we pass continually. One may awaken in the human realm, drift into heaven at midday, fall into conflict by afternoon, and touch despair before nightfall. The wheel turns not across lifetimes, but across moments. The purpose of this teaching is not moral judgment, nor is it an attempt to frighten or control. It is an invitation to notice, to see that much of our suffering arises not from circumstances themselves, but from the unconscious ways we inhabit. We move from realm to realm without awareness, repeating the same patterns, driven by habit and reaction. The Dharma, then, is not a belief system imposed from outside. It is a mirror. It shows us how we are living, how we are moving, how we are caught. And in seeing this clearly, something begins to loosen. The wheel still turns, but one is no longer entirely carried by it. One begins to stand at the center, where movement is seen for what it is, and need not be followed blindly. In this way, the teaching is not about escaping the world, but about understanding it. Not about becoming something else, but about seeing what is already taking place. You might notice something rather odd about the human realm. It is not especially comfortable, nor is it particularly stable, and yet it is said to be the most fortunate condition of all. Why should that be? Well, if life is too pleasant, one tends to drift. There is nothing to question. One simply enjoys. and falls asleep inside the enjoyment. And if life is too painful, one is overwhelmed by it. There is no room to inquire, only the need to escape. But the human condition sits curiously in between. Just enough pleasure to keep you interested, just enough difficulty to make you wonder, what on earth is going on? A cat does not ask why it is a cat. A god, intoxicated with bliss, does not ask what bliss is. But a human being, caught between delight and frustration, suddenly pauses and asks, what is all this about? And that question is not a problem. It is the beginning of awareness. To be human, then, is not merely to exist, but to notice existence happening, to sense that there is a pattern moving through thoughts, emotions, and action. That noticing is the peculiar privilege of the human realm. Rebirth, when looked at this way, is far less mysterious than it sounds. It has nothing to do with moral scorekeeping. It is simply repetition. Anything that is done unconsciously tends to repeat itself. A habit, once formed, has a remarkable talent for continuing. Anger that is indulged today feels strangely familiar tomorrow. Desire that promises satisfaction has a way of returning unchanged. Fear, when believed, becomes very convincing indeed. So one is reborn, moment after moment, into the same reaction, the same attitudes, the same sense of being a separate little person struggling against the world. Not because one is being punished, but because one has not yet noticed what is happening. The universe, after all, is not trying to correct you. It simply reflects you. And so the wheel turns, not maliciously, not deliberately, but automatically, until one day, quite unexpectedly, you catch yourself in the act. So, you see, the point of this is not to get out of the wheel. That would be like trying to step out of your own shadow. The wheel turns because it is what the mind does. It moves, it reacts, it repeats itself quite naturally the way waves move on the ocean. And the mistake is to imagine that somewhere there must be a final state, a permanent heaven where nothing ever goes wrong again. That idea itself is just another turn of the wheel. What changes everything is not escape, but recognition. The moment you notice that you are angry, you are no longer only angry. The moment you see desire arising, there is already a little space around it. And that space is extraordinarily important, because the wheel can only trap you if you believe you are identical with whatever state you're in. I am furious. I am afraid. I am lacking. But when you see these as movements, passing moods, temporary weather, the spell loosens. Life continues exactly as before. People still disappoint you. Pleasure still fades. But there is now a sense that you are watching it all happen rather than being pushed around by it. And that, in a way, is the joke the universe has been waiting for you to get. The wheel does not require your effort. It requires your attention. Notice how easily the mind slips from pleasure into grasping, from grasping into frustration, from frustration into conflict. And notice, too, how naturally it tells a story afterward, a story about who you are and what the world is doing to you. But when you see the story being told, even for a moment, you are no longer entirely inside it. The wheel keeps turning, of course. Thoughts still arise. Emotions still move. Life continues to do what it has always done. And yet, there is now a certain lightness, as though you have realized that you were never meant to ride the wheel so seriously. After all, a wheel is not a trap. It is a dance. And the curious thing is this: the moment you stop trying to control the dance. You discover you were already moving with it. And that, after all, is the whole point.